I woke up that morning with a weird mix of excitement and nerves buzzing in my chest. The sunlight was spilling through the blinds, painting stripes across my floor like a spotlight, and for some reason, it made the world feel extra alive. Birds were chirping outside, their songs somehow louder than usual, like they knew today was important. I rolled over, reached for my phone, and checked the time. Too early, of course, but who actually sleeps when something big is waiting? Not me. Today was my brother's graduation, and honestly, I was proud. Proud in a way that made my chest ache a little. I could picture him in that cap and gown, walking across the stage, shaking hands, smiling for the cameras. I imagined the decorations, the balloons, the table stacked with food, the cake with his name on it in big, fancy letters. I even imagined the way the house would smell. Fresh flowers mixed with the faint aroma of whatever breakfast mom was probably burning as we all rushed around. And I thought, quietly, to myself, I can't wait to see him walk across that stage. This is his moment, and mine, too, in a way. Because yes, it's his day, but growing up with him, cheering for him at every little victory, I'd earned a slice of this pride too. I remembered past family events, birthdays, holidays, the little Sunday dinners that felt ordinary, but somehow perfect. Those were the moments when I felt like I truly belonged, when the laughter around the table wasn't just background noise, but something that included me, really included me. And for some reason, that memory made me smile more than anything else that morning that I got out of bed slowly, savoring the quiet before the chaos. I pulled out my outfit, something casual but not too casual, because even if it's just family, there's a certain level of pride you want to show. I could hear the faint hum of the city waking up outside, cars starting, dogs barking, and it all felt like the world itself was hinting, get ready. Today is going to be big. I didn't know it yet, but somewhere in that glow of morning, sunlight and the sound of birds, the day had already started to shift. Everything felt warm, calm, and perfect. I had no idea that the storm was waiting just around the corner that I tried to shake off that morning glow as I checked my phone again, just to make sure I had the details right. I texted Dad about the time, the location, the little things you usually don't even think about, where to park, who's bringing what, whether there'd be a photographer. His replies came slowly, almost lazily, like he was answering someone else entirely. And when I tried to ask for specifics, he shrugged them off with a short, "You'll figure it out." Even my brother, usually the one who'd send a million reminders, a million little updates, was different. He didn't seem excited, not in the way I remembered. He gave me short, clipped answers, and when I asked about the guest list, he just laughed it off. But the laugh didn't reach his eyes. There was this distance, a subtle shift, almost imperceptible, but it made my stomach drop in a way I couldn't ignore. Okay, maybe they're just busy, I told myself. Yeah, that's all it is. Everyone's busy. But even as I said it, I felt that tiny, nagging worry curling in my chest. I kept replaying past conversations, searching for clues. Had I said something wrong? Missed a joke? Forgotten some rule? My mind started spinning in that familiar way, overthinking, reanalyzing, imagining every possible reason. And then, I remembered a small argument we'd had a while back. Nothing serious, really. He'd rolled his eyes at something I said. I'd muttered under my breath, and we'd both laughed it off. At the time, it felt silly, just another typical sibling moment. But now, it lingered, suddenly heavier, like a shadow stretching across the room. Maybe that was it. Maybe that tiny crack had grown into something bigger, something I couldn't see it. I kept checking my phone. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the ceiling, the walls, imagining every scenario that could explain this strange, cold distance. The room felt smaller somehow, the sunlight less comforting, the chirping, birds distant and hollow. It was weird, suddenly, everything that had felt normal, happy, warm, started to feel fragile, like glass teetering on the edge of a table that I didn't want to panic, didn't want to assume the worst. But that morning, that sense of excitement, of being part of something joyful, it started to feel uncertain. Like the air itself had shifted, subtle but undeniable, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. And maybe that's the worst part. Not knowing what, or why, or how. Just sensing that the world you thought was steady isn't. That I didn't expect it, not even for a second. I was sitting at the kitchen table, trying to distract myself with a cup of coffee when Dad casually mentioned it. "Oh, by the way, you're not on the guest list for the graduation party." It felt like someone had yanked the floor out from under me. I stared at him, my mouth dry, my hands gripping the edge of the table so hard I could feel the veins in my fingers. For a second, I thought I'd misheard. "Not on the guest list." My voice came out shakier than I intended, like I was repeating a bad joke that nobody else was laughing at. My brother, who'd been scrolling through his phone, looked up and shrugged. A lazy, almost bored shrug, like it wasn't a big deal. But to me, it was everything. All the excitement, all the pride I'd felt that morning. It evaporated in an instant, replaced by this cold, sharp ache in my chest. They removed me. On purpose, I whispered to myself. More to ground my own thoughts than to speak out loud. I flashed back to all the little moments I'd shared with him. The late-night video calls when he needed help with assignments. Cheering him on at soccer games. Helping him rehearse speeches for school events. I remembered thinking, this is who we are? This is my family, my brother, my people. And suddenly, it felt like all of that had been written in invisible ink. Important only to me that I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Part of me wanted to make a sarcastic joke to lighten the sting. The classic, "Wow, thanks for including me. Oh wait, you didn't," kind of thing. But the joke caught in my throat. There was no humor in it. Just disbelief. Just the quiet, sinking realization that I'd been left out. Not by accident, not by oversight, but deliberately. I sat there, staring at my coffee cup, watching the steam curl lazily upward, and tried to wrap my head around it. The smell of the coffee, the clatter of dishes in the background, even the sunlight spilling across the table, it all felt wrong, like it belonged to someone else's life, not mine. I didn't speak. I couldn't. My mind was racing, flipping through every possible explanation, every conversation I'd had with them over the past months. Nothing made sense. Nothing added up. I just felt small, invisible. The kind of hurt that doesn't scream but quietly burrows into your chest and makes every breath feel heavier. And in that quiet kitchen, in that bright morning light that had felt so warm before, I realized something. Nothing would feel the same again. I tried to keep my voice calm when I asked Dad about it later that day. Calm, like it was just a simple question, not the thing twisting my chest into knots. "Why wasn't I invited?" I asked, careful to sound casual, though I could feel my heartbeat hammering against my ribs. He shrugged, like it wasn't a big deal. "It's just the way we're doing it this time," he said. That casual shrug hit me like a slap. "Just the way we're doing it." I repeated, the words sour in my mouth. "Can you explain that?" And he didn't. Not really. He just waved me off, muttered something about logistics, and walked away. My brother, who was nearby, didn't even look up. He half smiled, half smirked, and said, "It's fine. Don't worry about it." Like it was the easiest thing in the world to be deliberately erased from someone else's celebration. I sat there, stunned, trying to process it, trying to understand. Because sometimes, if you understand something, it doesn't hurt as much, right? That's what I kept telling myself. But the more I asked, the more I realized they didn't want me to understand. They didn't want to explain. They didn't care. I felt that familiar tightening in my chest, the one I get when I feel invisible. Memories started flooding back, little moments that suddenly seemed like warnings I hadn't noticed. Birthday dinners where my ideas were brushed off. Family outings where my presence was taken for granted. 1,000 tiny slights that didn't matter on their own, but added up, silently, over the years. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe it's nothing personal. Maybe they just forgot. Maybe there's a reason I don't know. But even as I told myself that, I knew the truth. Forgetting doesn't come with deliberate exclusion. Forgetting doesn't come with a shrug and a half smile. This was intentional, and it hurt, more than I wanted to admit. I wanted to scream, to cry, to shake them and say, "Do you even see me? Do I even exist to you?" But I didn't. I sat there, quiet, letting the hurt simmer inside me, a slow burn that made every normal sound. The clink of dishes, the hum of the fridge, even the soft tapping of keys, feel like it belonged somewhere else, somewhere I wasn't. Aloud, I realized that understanding wasn't coming. There would be no explanation that would make this okay. And that truth hit me harder than the initial shock. Not only had I been left out, I wasn't even allowed to ask why the time the afternoon rolled around. The shock had faded, but it left behind something hotter, sharper. Anger. That slow, simmering kind that curls in your stomach and makes your hands clench without warning. I kept replaying the morning over and over in my head, like a broken record. Every word, every shrug, every dismissive glance. It all started to feel like a deliberate pattern that I paced around my room, fists tight at my sides, muttering under my breath. How could they do this? How could they just leave me out? After everything. And then the thoughts got louder, more reckless. I started remembering all the times I'd tried to help, all the times I'd gone out of my way to make family gatherings better, to be part of something bigger than myself. And now, it felt like none of it mattered. Like every small effort, every late-night conversation, every joke, every shared memory, it was all invisible. Anger turned to resentment. I thought about past celebrations where I'd been sidelined, even just slightly. The birthdays where my gift or my card went unnoticed. The dinners where my opinion was brushed aside. It all came back, fast and raw, like someone had poured salt on a wound I didn't even know was still open. I grabbed my phone and stared at the screen, half expecting some magical message that would fix everything, that would explain the inexplicable. Nothing, just emptiness. And then I remembered my brother laughing that morning, shrugging like it was nothing. That memory alone made my blood boil that I wanted to scream. I wanted to slam doors, to throw things, to make them feel even a fraction of what I was feeling. I wanted to hurt, not them physically, not even emotionally, but I wanted to see them realize that this exclusion, this cold shrug, this disregard, it mattered. To me. I sank into my bed, fists still tight, and let the anger wash over me. There was bitterness now, a kind of heat that made everything around me feel sharper, the edges of the furniture, the sunlight coming through the blinds. Even the ticking of the clock sounded cruel. My room, once a refuge, felt smaller, tighter, like it was closing in with all the resentment I couldn't shake. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the rage and the hurt, a quiet thought whispered, "This isn't fair, and I won't forget it." I didn't know what I'd do with that anger yet, but I knew it was mine to carry, mine to figure out. And strangely, that thought, angry, raw, and unpolished, gave me a tiny spark of power, even in the middle of all the chaos in my chest. After the anger had burned for a while, it faded into something quieter, heavier. Sadness. A loneliness that wrapped around me like a thick, suffocating blanket. I shut my door and sat on the floor, back against it, knees drawn up, letting myself sink into the emptiness. For the first time that day, I let the tears come without shame, without thinking about how I should feel or what I should do next. I felt small, invisible, like I had been erased from this moment that should have been mine to share, too. The house around me carried on as if nothing had happened. The faint hum of the refrigerator, the creak of floorboards in the hallway, the distant sound of voices laughing at something I wasn't part of. Each sound was a reminder that I was watching life happen from the outside, barred from the celebration that was supposed to include me. Memories began to float up, uninvited. Quiet childhood mornings where I'd sit at the table hoping someone would notice me. Birthday parties where I clutched gifts, only to feel overlooked. Holidays when I laughed along, but always sensed the subtle distance between me and the rest. I hadn't realized how much of that loneliness had built inside me until now that I thought about the life I wanted to have with my family. Connected, seen, valued, and it felt like a cruel joke. Every small effort I had made to bond with my brother, every gesture of care, every time I tried to show up for him, did it even matter? Sitting there on the cold floor, I realized that sometimes it doesn't. And the truth hurt more than the exclusion itself. That I looked out the window and noticed the rain beginning to fall, soft and steady. The smell of wet pavement mixed with the faint scent of grass outside, grounding me in the present. I let myself sit in it, letting the sadness settle in, letting it soak into my bones. Because I knew I couldn't move forward without acknowledging it first. Somewhere between the loneliness and the reflection, I felt a tiny spark of clarity. This hurt was real, and so was my place outside of their choices. But my worth, my presence. In the world, it wasn't dependent on their approval. Even as the walls of my room felt tight and suffocating, a small part of me understood that this moment, this isolation, was a chance to find myself, to recognize my own value. And though the loneliness lingered, for the first time that day, it wasn't just despair. It was the quiet beginning of understanding, a small, fragile step toward reclaiming a part of me that had felt invisible for far too long. After hours of sitting with the hurt and the loneliness, a slow shift began. Not sudden, not dramatic, just a quiet, insistent voice in my chest that refused to be ignored. If they won't let me in, I'll make my own moment. It wasn't revenge. Not exactly. It was something simpler, something more personal, reclaiming my presence, my voice, my right to matter. I stood up, stiff and achy from hours of sitting, and started pacing again. My mind raced with possibilities, small things I could do, gestures I could make, ways to show myself that I wasn't powerless. Every idea felt like a thread of control, like the first step out of a fog that had been closing in for days. That I thought about past moments when I'd stood up for myself, even in tiny ways. Times I had turned a setback into a small victory, a disappointment into a lesson. I remembered the pride I'd felt the first time I proved someone wrong, not to hurt them, but to prove to myself that I mattered. And for the first time that day, that spark of confidence grew. It wasn't about them. It was about me. I grabbed a notebook and started scribbling ideas, planning something symbolic, something that would let me participate in this day without needing their approval. I didn't want attention. I didn't want drama. I just wanted acknowledgement. Acknowledgement of my own existence, my own joy, my own pride. That I imagined myself walking in, small but visible, carrying a gesture that was mine entirely, a card, a message, even just a quiet presence that they couldn't erase. My chest tightened with anticipation and a little fear, but it was a good kind of tension, the kind that comes with reclaiming a piece of yourself you thought was lost. The sun was starting to dip lower, casting longer shadows across my room. I packed a small bag, preparing for the symbolic act that would mark this turning point. With every item I gathered, every step I took, I felt my chest lighten a little. The anger hadn't disappeared, and the hurt was still raw, but determination had taken root, strong and steady. I realized something crucial. This wasn't about them seeing me. It was about me seeing myself. About proving, quietly but undeniably, that I didn't need their permission to exist, to celebrate, to feel proud. And in that realization, for the first time since morning, I felt a kind of freedom. When I finally stepped out the door, the air felt different, cooler, crisper, almost electric. It wasn't just the evening air. It was the feeling of purpose, of finally doing something. For myself, I carried a small bag with me. Nothing dramatic, nothing meant to make a scene. Just something that would quietly mark my presence, my voice, my claim to this day. That I drove slowly. The city streets familiar, yet somehow unfamiliar in this new light. Every red light, every honk, every flicker of neon felt amplified, like the world had suddenly sharpened around me. My hands gripped the steering wheel, tight but steady, my chest thumping with a mixture of nerves and resolve. This was it. No turning back. When I arrived, I didn't march in like I owned the place, and I didn't hide. I found a small spot where I could be seen but not intrude, a quiet corner, a gesture of my own making waiting to be noticed. I left it there carefully, intentionally, a card, a small gift, something that carried my pride, my feelings, my presence. It was subtle, but it spoke louder than words ever could. I watched from that corner as people milled about, the laughter, the clinking of glasses, the chatter, all the celebrations I had imagined that morning. But now I was seeing it from the edges. And instead of sinking back into hurt, I felt a strange, quiet satisfaction. I had shown up, on my terms, not for them, not for validation, but for me. For a moment, my brother's eyes caught mine. I saw a flicker of recognition, a pause in the world around him. He didn't know what to make of it, and maybe he never would. And that was fine. I wasn't here for understanding anymore. I was here to mark my own territory in this day, to make sure that, even if they tried to erase me, I existed. I mattered. The sun was setting now, casting a golden glow across the room. I stood there, letting it wash over me, feeling the weight of the morning lift just a little. The hurt and the anger hadn't vanished, but they had transformed. They were no longer chains. They were fuel. Fuel to remind me that I had power, that I could create moments for myself, that I could reclaim joy even when others tried to withhold it. And in that quiet, defiant act, I realized something important. I didn't need their approval to celebrate my brother, to feel proud of him, or to honor my own place in this family, even if it was in my own way. The room settled into its usual rhythm after the initial excitement of the party. People laughed, took pictures, passed around plates of food, but I stayed where I had chosen, quiet, small, yet undeniably present. Some of the guests didn't even notice me. Some glanced my way and quickly looked away. And then there were a few subtle acknowledgments, a nod, a smile, a raised glass. Small gestures, but enough to remind me that I had done something right. For myself. My brother, of course, noticed. I caught him looking, a flicker of confusion and maybe even guilt crossing his face. I didn't go to him. I didn't demand acknowledgement. I simply let him see me, and that alone was enough. For the first time that day, I felt the power shift slightly, not in dominance, but in self-possession. I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't sidelined. I existed on my terms. Yet, even as I felt that empowerment, there was a bitter aftertaste, a quiet sadness that lingered beneath the pride. I realized that no act, no gesture, no clever little entrance could fully mend the rift between us. The distance, the deliberate exclusion, the indifference, it remained. And that hurt, that knowledge, it was real, it was raw, and it was something I would carry, at least a little, moving forward. That I wandered through the crowd, watching the celebration unfold around me. The clinking of glasses, the laughter, the chatter, it was all brighter, richer, somehow, now that I was part of it on my own terms. I felt pride, not just for my brother, though he was amazing, but pride in myself, in my ability to act even when I felt powerless. Later, I found a quiet corner outside, the evening air crisp against my skin, and I let myself reflect. The family dynamics, the exclusions, the subtle and overt slights, they were part of my story, yes, but they didn't define me. My worth, my presence, my joy, they weren't dependent on anyone else's recognition. And that realization, fragile and tender as it was, felt like a victory. That I smiled quietly to myself, a mixture of relief and lingering sorrow, and thought, I won't forget this. But I don't need anyone to validate me to matter. The day had been complicated, painful, and yet, in its own way, transformative. I had survived it. I had marked my space. And in that, I found a strange, quiet kind of peace. By the time the party wound down, I felt a shift inside me, a quiet settling of the storm that had been raging since that morning. I wasn't happy with what had happened. I wasn't naive enough to pretend the hurt and the exclusion didn't sting. But there was something else now, something steady, something I could hold on to. Clarity. That I realized that family doesn't always behave the way we hope they will. They don't always notice us, include us, or treat us the way we think we deserve. And that's painful. It cuts deep, but it doesn't erase who we are. It doesn't determine our worth. I felt that truth settle in my chest like a small, warming ember after a long, cold day. That I thought back to the morning, the sunlight spilling across my floor, the excitement and pride I had felt. That me, the me who cared, who celebrated, who hoped, was still inside me. And that me was enough. I didn't need anyone else's approval to reclaim joy, to feel proud, to honor the love I felt for my brother, even if he and Dad had made choices that hurt me. I packed up my small symbolic gesture, feeling its weight lighter now. I didn't need it anymore, not as a statement, not as a defiance. It had done its job. It had reminded me that I existed, that I mattered, that I could act for myself. And that lesson, I knew, would stay with me long after the balloons were taken down, the photos put away, and the party ended. As I walked away, the evening air cool against my skin, I let myself breathe. I let myself smile, quietly, softly, without guilt or expectation. I thought about the future, the birthdays, the graduations, the moments that might come and go. I couldn't control what anyone else would do. I couldn't ensure that they would see me, appreciate me, or include me. But I could control how I showed up for myself, and that, I realized, was enough. Maybe someday things would be different with them. Maybe not. But I had learned something invaluable. My happiness, my pride, my presence. Those were mine to claim, mine to protect. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. I walked into the night with my head held a little higher, the city lights twinkling like tiny promises, and I whispered to myself, I am more than what they define me to be, and I always will be.